Now, the WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has lost his appeal against extradition to Sweden on sexual assault allegations. Mr. Assange says the charges are politically motivated and fears Sweden will send him to the United States.
Now, his lawyers argue the case on a legal technicality, saying the Swedish extradition order was not actually issued by a judicial authority. So, where to from here now? Don Rothwell is a professor of international law at the Australian National University, and he joins us from Canberra. Don Rothwell, good morning. Well, I put the question to you. Just how confident would you be of having that case reopened by Britain's Supreme Court?
Look, it appears that the argument might revolve around whether there was an opportunity to present legal argument to the court on the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties. But my reading of the judgment overnight is that the court has relied upon a fairly traditional interpretation of those issues in looking at the UK Extradition Act. So I wouldn't have a great deal of confidence that those grounds would succeed on further appeal.
Because the case at issue here is that a judicial authority on the continent in many European countries is very different to how the Britons see judicial authorities. They see them purely as judges, whereas in this case a Swedish prosecutor got given the tick by the UK Supreme Court.
Correct, and one of the key issues that came out in the judgment was that when the Extradition Act and the relevant provisions were debated in the House of Commons in the UK, there was in fact that traditional understanding of what a judicial authority was, as you've referred to, but the UK Supreme Court has really ruled that ultimately it's European law which governs, the law which was found in the mechanisms for the European arrest warrant, and as a result a much broader understanding of that term applies, and accordingly the Swedish arrest warrant is valid.
Yeah, OK. So for argument's sake, the court doesn't agree to reopen the case. Julian Assange's team then goes all the way to the European Court for Human Rights. Do you expect to see that body put on hold or throw into doubt the entire extradition framework in Europe?
Look, I doubt it, primarily because the Supreme Court's decision was in line with general European authority on the whole question of extradition and European arrest warrants. Unless Mr. Assange can introduce another argument to suggest that his human rights are being infringed, and on that point, clearly he's been able to be afforded complete due process through the UK legal system. So unless there's another novel argument that they can develop, I don't see his prospects of success at the European Court level very high either.
So, therefore, you fully expect, given further legal argument, Julian Assange to actually end up before a Swedish court in the not-too-distant future?
Yes, and if that does occur, well then we have to remember that Mr. Assange is yet to be charged with any offences in Sweden. He's wanted for questioning by the Swedish prosecutor. Mr. Assange might be extradited to Sweden. He might be questioned and there might be a finding that he has no charges to answer, and he might then be released. Or, of course, he then might find himself charged and go to trial.
And what do you say to people like John Pilger, one of Julian Assange's more prominent supporters? He told journalists overnight that essentially the Australian government had hung Julian Assange out to dry, not offering the support he was entitled to. What's your take on how the Australian government has played this very high-profile case?
Well, look, I think the Australian government has been actively monitoring the case. The High Commission in London has been actively involved in the matter. It needs to be recalled, though, that the Australian government has limitations under international law as to what it can do at the moment. And until such time as Mr. Assange has exhausted what are called his local remedies under international law, the ability of the Australian government to really become proactively engaged, exploring a whole range of legal options, is really very limited.
Don Rothwell in Canberra, thank you.
You're welcome, Michael.